Thank you. Love the sign. That's a great sign. The sign the lady just held up said, hold it up again. This woman is our destiny. Shut up and vote Carly. Okay, well, I couldn't say that, but thank you very much for that very warm welcome, and thank you, Frank and Belinda, for opening up Melaleuca. I had a great morning here with the management team and some members of your community. I want to start in an unlikely place, if I may, to try and explain what I think is at stake in this nation, why I'm running for president, why I need your help, not just to win this job, but to do this job. So let me begin a long way from here. In January of this year, before I launched my campaign for president, I was, among other things, the chairman of the largest private microfinance organization in the world, called Opportunity International, Christian-based microfinance organization. And in January, I traveled to the slums of New Delhi to meet with some of our clients. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the slums of New Delhi, but they're pretty grim places. Mountains of trash, marauding animals, sewage in the streets, people piled on top of each other. Opportunity International has lent about $6 billion, $150 at a time, and we've lifted millions of people out of poverty by giving them a helping hand, by taking a chance on them, by teaching them how to become entrepreneurs and build a better life for themselves and their families. And so I traveled to the slums to meet with some of our clients. Now, considering the desperate circumstances in which they lived, I imagined that they would look desperate. I climbed a rickety ladder and met on the top of a roof with 10 of our clients. And yet, despite their circumstances, they did not look desperate. They looked hopeful. They looked determined. They looked focused. Because, of course, we had done much more than hand them $150 or give them tools or training or support. We had done more than give them a helping hand and take a chance on them. We had said to them, you have potential. You can make something of your life. You can create possibilities for yourselves by using your God-given gifts. When I was a little girl, about 8 years old, my mother said to me one Sunday morning, what you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God. And those words landed in my young life because I didn't feel very gifted, honestly, as a young girl or as a young woman. But her words were a promise to me and a challenge. You have God-given gifts, find and use them. And as I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world over many decades, I have come to learn that indeed everyone has God-given gifts. Everyone has potential, regardless of their circumstances, usually far more than they realize. I have also come to know, I have come to understand deeply that it is only in this country that a young woman could start as I did. I started as a secretary. I typed, I filed, I answered the phones for a 9-person real estate firm. I had no idea what my future would be until one day 2 men came to my desk and said, we've been watching you. You have possibilities. You can do more than type and file. And they sent me on a different trajectory in my life. But I am keenly aware that it is only in this nation that a young woman can start out in the middle of a deep recession, typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person company, go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible here. And it's worth asking why. It's worth asking why is that only possible here? I believe we must remember who we are so that we can become who we must be. So let's remember who we are. Why is it only possible here when, in truth, everyone has gifts all over the world? Everyone has possibilities. Why here? We all need a helping hand. I've needed a helping hand many times. When I battled cancer, I needed a helping hand. When we buried our daughter, she died from the demons of addiction, we needed a helping hand. I've needed people to take a chance on me. We all do. And yet, despite all of our imperfections as a nation, it is true that more things have been more possible for more people here than anywhere else on the face of the planet. Why? Because our nation was founded on a visionary idea. And the idea was that here, every individual has value. Every individual has value. Every life is filled with possibilities and potential. And our founders said, when they built this nation, that here you have a right to fulfill your potential, to find and use your God-given gifts, to discover your possibilities. They express that as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what they meant was, you have a right to fulfill your potential. And they said, and this was radical, and they said that right comes from God and cannot be taken away by man or government. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for the presidency of the United States because I believe we have come to a pivotal point in our nation's history, where the possibilities for too many Americans, indeed the potential of this great nation, is being crushed by a government that has grown too big, too powerful, too costly, too complicated, too inept, and too corrupt, and a professional political class that refuses to do anything much about it. And I believe at this pivotal point in our nation's history, we must take our government back, because ours was intended to be a citizen government. I gave a speech a year and a half ago at a Rotary Club. It was a bipartisan audience. And at the end of my speech, I was talking about human potential. I wasn't yet running for president, and how human potential is the only limitless resource we have. It's the only resource we need to solve every problem. And at the end of my speech, a man came up to me and he said, "You know, I'm a Democrat. I didn't think I was going to agree with you on anything. And I agreed with you on everything." He said, "We don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore." And that really hit me. Because when we stop thinking of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility, then we lose the core of who we are. Because we always knew if something was hard to do, we would do it as a nation. If we had to figure it out, even better, we'd figure it out. We always knew that our children and our grandchildren's lives would be better than our own. I am not sure now that my two granddaughters' lives will be better than mine was. This is why we must take our government back. And you know what? The vast majority of American people agree with those of us who have deep disquiet about our nation. 75% of the American people now think we have a federal government that is corrupt. I agree with them. 82% of the American people now think we have a professional political class that cares more about the protection of its own power, position, and privilege than getting anything done. I agree with that too. And so that says the majority of the citizens of this nation have figured it out. The system is broken. The game is rigged. And the people who are getting taken advantage of are not the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected. They are actually working the system to their benefit. Because when you're big, when you're powerful, when you're wealthy, you're well-connected, you can do what? You can hire accountants and lawyers and lobbyists and all the people that help you figure out this big, complicated game, whether it's the thicket of regulation or the 73,000-page tax code or the reams and reams and reams of bureaucratic rules that roll out from our government from a set of people who are nameless, who are faceless, who are elected by no one and accountable to no one. But if you're small and you're powerless, you're getting crushed. We tangle people's lives up in webs of dependence that last for generations. We don't say to somebody, "Let me give you a helping hand, let me take a chance on you." We tangle people's lives up in those webs of dependence forever. All the incentives are not for them to move forward in their lives. The incentives are for them to lay back. We're now destroying, for the first time in U.S. history, we are destroying more businesses than we are creating. That is why our economy is only growing at 2%. That is why we have so many people who want to work more but can't find a job. It is why our labor participation rates are sitting at the lowest levels since the mid-70s. It's why wages haven't grown. Because the engine of job creation and economic growth in this country has always been small businesses, family-owned businesses and farms, new businesses. And for the first time in U.S. history, we are destroying more businesses than we are creating. The big guys are doing great. It's called crony capitalism. But small, new, family-owned, 70,000 of them are going out of business each and every year. And meanwhile, government just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And government has gotten bigger and more expensive every year for 50 years. That's a fact. There is no consequence for non-performance in government. None. We don't know where our money is being spent. We only talk about every year in appropriations hearings the amount of money we're going to spend that's new over last year's budget. And that's how we've gotten to a situation where the government spends more money every single year and yet never has enough money to do the important things. How long have we been talking about the same issues? How long have we been talking about immigration, securing our border, fixing the legal immigration system? 25 years. How long have we been talking about caring for our veterans? 2 decades. How long have we been talking about reforming the tax code? How long have we been talking about reforming entitlements? How long have we been talking about reducing the size and scope and power of government? Decades. And it doesn't happen. It reminds me of the difference between management and leadership. You see, managers are people who do the best they can within the existing system. They do the best they can within the status quo. They don't challenge the status quo. And because they don't challenge the status quo, they end up tinkering around the edges of problems. It's not that they're bad people. It's a little bit like, fish swim in water, they don't know it's water. They're just in it. Well, if you've been in a system for so long, you don't see it for what it is anymore. That happens to a lot of managers in a lot of places. We have managers in business. We have managers in life. We have managers in politics. But leaders are altogether different than managers. Leaders know their job is to challenge the status quo. They know their job is not to accept a system that has been broken for a really long time, but to actually fix the system. And they know that to get that done, they have to unlock the potential of others. People sometimes ask me, how did I go from secretary to CEO? And I didn't have a plan to do that, but I found I would run to problems instead of running away from them. And every time I ran to a problem, I found people who knew how to solve the problem. It's just they'd never been asked. And so I asked them. And then together we challenge the status quo, we solve problems, and we produce results. So, to take our government back, to get our economy moving again, to actually cut down the size, the weight, the power, the ineptitude, and the corruption of the federal government, we need a leader in the White House who will tap the common sense, the good judgment, and yes, the anger and the frustration of the citizens of this nation. So let me tell you how I'm going to do that. First of all, let me ask a little question. How many of you still own a flip phone? Okay. You need to upgrade. You have 16 months to do it. And I'll tell you why it's so important to do it. Because let's face it, you know the answers to a lot of these problems. Let me give you an example. How is it possible? I said, how is it possible that the federal government spends more money each and every year and never has enough money to do the important things? How is that possible? Well, because we don't know where our money is being spent. And all the money is always spoken for, right? Nobody's prepared to give up money to, this isn't working anymore over here, so let's put this money over here. No, we don't do that. In order to know where our money is being spent and be able to prioritize how our money is spent so that we can invest in the right things and yet spend less overall, what do we need to do? We need to know where our money is being spent. We need to go to some version of zero-based budgeting so that every agency has to justify every dollar every single year, right? You know that. You know that. So why the smartphone? Because I will Go into the Oval Office regularly. You know, the president has a weekly radio address. I'm going to ask you in my weekly radio addresses, I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones. Because the political process, your representatives, your congresspeople and your senators need to hear from you. And so I will say, please take out your smartphones. Ladies and gentlemen, do you agree with me that we need to know where your money is being spent? Do we need to justify each and every dollar so we can spend every dollar wisely and well? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. This technology exists. We're going to use technology to focus the common sense, good judgment, anger, and frustration of the American people on the political process because we know politicians respond to pressure. Here's another question. Do you think it's important that there are consequences for non-performance in a government job? Yes, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. How do I know this is going to work, you might ask? How do I know this will work? Well, because remember 18 months ago when the scandal of the Arizona wait times in the VA hit? Remember we learned that veterans had died. They had died waiting for an appointment, and we had bureaucrats who were cooking the books to hide the evidence. And the American people were so outraged that you flooded your congressmen and senators' offices with emails and phone calls, and guess what happened? The political process reacted to your pressure. In 3 weeks, a bipartisan bill was passed saying that we could fire the top 400 senior executives of the VA if they didn't do their jobs. It is a demonstration that pressure from citizens appropriately applied works. That's the good news. By the way, what a great idea. Why shouldn't we be able to fire people in the federal government who don't do their jobs? Honestly. The bad news is only one person's been fired. And we've since learned that 307,000 veterans have died before they ever got health care. And nothing's happened, and you hear nothing. But a President Fiorina will ensure that the political process hears from the citizens of this nation, because that kind of incompetence is not just ineptitude, it is a stain on the character of our nation. So upgrade, sir. Leaders challenge the status quo. And by the way, we have to get our economy going and growing again. We have to make some fundamental changes to the process of government so that it is once again responsive to those who pay for it. And we must, of course, lead again in the world. Because when we do not lead, when this unique nation does not lead, the world is a very dangerous place. So on day 1 in the Oval Office, I'm going to make 2 phone calls. The first will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu, to reassure him that this nation will stand with the state of Israel always. And the second phone call will be to the Supreme Leader of Iran. He might not take my phone call realistically, but he will get the message. And the message is New Deal. New Deal with a new president. I don't care what the old deal was. Here's the new deal. Until you open every military, every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible for you to move money around the global financial system. We must cut off the money flow. We can. We don't need anyone's permission or collaboration to do so. We must, because the money is being used to build military capability, nuclear capability, sow conflict and dissent. And with those 2 phone calls, a message will go loudly and clearly around the world. The United States of America is back in the leadership business. We must have the strongest military on the face of the planet, and everyone has to know it. And I will not speak to Vladimir Putin until we can speak to him from a position of strength, although I have met him. And so I will begin rebuilding our military. I will start with the 6th Fleet right under his nose. I'll start with the missile defense program in Poland. I'll start with regular military exercises in the Baltic states. And I will push back on China, a rising adversary who is trying to control a trade route in the South China Sea through which flows $5 trillion worth of goods and services. Ladies and gentlemen, at this pivotal point in our nation's history, there is much at stake. We are losing our citizen government. Our character is at stake. The possibilities for too many Americans are at stake, and our leadership and the security of the world are at stake. I need your votes, your support, your prayers. To win this job, we will need a fearless fighter, because this is a fight over how we see our nation and the future of our nation. I went on The View. You know, I've been asked a bunch of interesting questions in the course of my campaign. I don't know, I have a reputation for answering many questions. One of the questions I got asked, as I sat on The View and had quite a good time, one of their hosts said to me, "You know, Carly, I'm not a Republican." I said, "Wow, I'm shocked. I wouldn't have guessed that." Why are you? That is the question we must answer to win this election. And my answer was this: because I know that no one of us is any better than any other one of us. Each of us are gifted by God. All of us can live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning. And I know our values and our policies and our principles work better to lift everyone up. Progressives do not believe this. They believe some are better than others, some are smarter than others. It's okay, some are going to take care of others. And I believe that is the height of disrespect and disregard for our fellow citizens. But we also need someone once who has won this job, and that's the fight we have, to reintroduce what conservatism means, who we are as a nation, and who we must be. We need somebody who can do the job. And I believe to do this job at this pivotal point now requires someone who actually understands how the economy works, who understands the world and how it works and who's in it, who understands bureaucracies, how to cut them down to size and hold them accountable, who understands technology, which is both a tool that can be used to re-engage citizens in the process of their government, as well as a weapon being used against us. And perhaps most importantly of all, we need someone who understands what leadership is. Leadership is not about how big your office is, or how big your airplane, or how big your ego is. Leadership is about service. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. And now we need a leader who has experience making a tough call when a tough call is required, who has experience being held accountable for those tough calls, but who understands that their highest calling is to unlock the potential of this great nation. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as you go about your lives as citizens, as you think about the choices that confront us as a nation, I want to go all the way back to something I said at the beginning. We must remember who we are in order to be what we must become in this century. So I will close by reminding you who we are. And to do so, I will ask you to think of two of the most powerful symbols of our nation's democracy: Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. Think about Lady Liberty. She stands tall and strong, which is the way America must always be. She is clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't hide her eyes from the realities or the evils of the world, but she nevertheless faces out into the world, which is the way we must always face. And she holds her torch high because she knows she's a beacon of hope in a very troubled world. And Lady Justice holds a sword by her side because she's a fighter. She's a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in her other hand, and with that scale, she reminds us all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And with that blindfold, I think she is reminding us that it must be true, it can be true, that in this nation, in this century, it does not matter what you look like. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter your circumstances. It does not matter how you start. Here in this nation, every American's life must be filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts. And we must be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you.